It was an ordinary afternoon at the White House, or so it seemed. The security staff was on high alert, ensuring that everything was in perfect order. The presidential motorcade was scheduled for a crucial trip to meet with foreign dignitaries, and the limos were being prepped for the ride. Among the many elite who surrounded the president, there was one person who wasn't like the others: 12-year-old Sophie Carter, the daughter of one of the White House mechanics. Sophie was quiet, observant, and incredibly gifted when it came to all things mechanical. Most people didn't know that Sophie had been tinkering with engines and gadgets since she could remember. One day, while her father worked on the presidential limos, Sophie had wandered into the garage, her curious eyes scanning the complex machines. She didn't just admire the engines, she understood them. At 12, Sophie had a rare talent that many adults couldn't claim. She had a natural knack for mechanics, even picking up advanced skills that were beyond her age. Her father often joked that she could probably build a car from scratch if given the chance. On this particular day, as Sophie quietly observed the work being done on the presidential limo, something went wrong. The engine, which had been running perfectly just hours before, sputtered and then completely shut down. The mechanics around her were puzzled. It seemed as though they were facing a technical issue beyond their expertise. With a knowing glance at her father, Sophie stepped forward, her small hands brushing away the bystanders as she calmly took charge. The Secret Service agents who were standing guard near the garage doors glanced over, initially dismissing her as a mere child. They had no idea that this was the moment that would change everything. The sound of the engine sputtering in the presidential limo garage was unexpected. As the motorcade was scheduled to depart in less than an hour, the urgency was palpable. The team of professional mechanics worked quickly to identify the problem, but they were coming up short. The limo was an advanced vehicle, and troubleshooting the engine was no easy feat. Every component had to function at its highest standard, especially when it was meant to transport the President of the United States. The head mechanic, an experienced veteran who had been with the White House fleet for over 15 years, attempted to manually restart the engine, but it remained silent. Panic started to rise among the staff. The engine refused to budge, and the thought of delaying the president's crucial meeting was becoming a real concern. The president's arrival was imminent, and the motorcade needed to be ready to roll. Sophie, who had been watching from the corner, noticed the growing tension. She'd seen this kind of problem before. It wasn't the engine, it was a fuse. The system that controlled the power supply to the engine had a blown fuse, a simple fix that no one had thought to check. But how could she bring it up without embarrassing the senior mechanics who were struggling to get it started? Just as one of the Secret Service agents began to suggest calling in backup, Sophie couldn't resist. She spoke up, her voice calm and confident. "It's the fuse," she said simply. Heads turned in surprise as the agent looked down at the young girl who had just suggested a solution that none of the adults had noticed. Her father, who had seen her work wonders with machines before, nodded. "Let her try," he said with a quiet assurance. The Secret Service agents were skeptical, but they stepped aside, allowing Sophie to approach the engine. What happened next left everyone in the room in awe. Sophie wasted no time. With precision beyond her years, she began to inspect the engine, her hands steady as she examined the wiring and components. She quickly identified the fuse in question, and without hesitation, she reached for a replacement. As she carefully removed the faulty fuse, everyone in the room watched in disbelief. They had never seen someone so young perform such a delicate task with such calm and confidence. The senior mechanic, who had initially been skeptical of Sophie's involvement, looked on in awe as she completed the repair in record time. Her hands moved with a familiarity that suggested she had done this countless times before. In a matter of minutes, the engine came back to life. The engine hummed, and the once dying limo was now fully operational. It was as though the entire room held its breath as Sophie stepped back, her work complete. The Secret Service agents, who had previously been dismissive, now stood frozen in place. They were stunned not just by Sophie's mechanical skill, but by the sheer audacity of a child being the one to solve the problem. It was a moment of realization. They were witnessing something extraordinary, and they hadn't even considered the possibility that this young girl could have been the solution all along. But there was more to this story than just a quick fix. The true shock came when Sophie stood up, pulling a small item from her pocket. It was a ring, an intricately designed piece of jewelry that her father had gifted her on her birthday. It wasn't just any ring, it was a tool in disguise, an engineering marvel of its own. As Sophie stood back from the limo, a Secret Service agent approached, curious about the ring she had pulled from her pocket. Sophie had always worn it, a gift from her father when she had turned 10. At first glance, it appeared to be just a simple silver band with a small gemstone in the center, but what the agents didn't realize was that it held a hidden function. The ring had been specially designed by Sophie's father, a master mechanic and engineer. He had outfitted it with miniature tools, a small screwdriver, a tiny wrench, and a compartment that held precision needles. Sophie had used this very ring to perform a quick fix on the limo, removing and replacing the fuse with ease. The ring, while appearing as a mere ornament, was in fact a tool that Sophie had used to perfect her skills. The Secret Service agents were in complete disbelief. They had seen the president's team of elite mechanics struggle with the situation, yet it was this young girl, with her ingenuity and cleverness, who had solved it. And to top it all off, it was the hidden ring that had helped her do it. The ring had been something Sophie had designed with her father, a small gesture of his faith in her abilities. They had spent countless hours working together, honing her mechanical skills. This ring had become an extension of her talent, a secret weapon that no one could have anticipated. Sophie, of course, had no idea the significance of her actions in that moment. She simply fixed the problem the way she knew best. As the limo's engine roared to life and the tension in the garage began to ease, the Secret Service agents exchanged stunned glances. They had witnessed something beyond their comprehension. Here was a young girl, just 12 years old, who had solved a crisis that had eluded even the most seasoned professionals. But there was more to this story, more than just the repair. One of the agents, still in disbelief, asked Sophie, "How did you know what to do?" Sophie shrugged nonchalantly. "It's just how I've been raised. My dad's a mechanic, and I've been fixing things since I was little." The agent shook his head, not fully understanding how a young child could possess such talent. As word spread throughout the White House, Sophie's skill became the talk of the day. What had started as a routine repair had now become a viral sensation. The Secret Service agents, now aware of the true genius behind the repair, were left speechless, amazed not only by the young girl's abilities, but also by the ring that had allowed her to accomplish what no one thought possible. That evening, the president himself thanked Sophie, acknowledging her contribution to saving the motorcade and ensuring that the scheduled meetings could take place. Sophie, however, remained humble, simply happy to have helped. It was a moment she would never forget, not because of the attention it brought, but because it was proof that sometimes the brightest minds come in the most unexpected packages.